What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Tuesday, May 24th, 2011, and we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Manny's in the control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and answering your phone calls. Now, Harold Camping has come out today saying, did I say May? Did I say May 21st for the rapture and the end of the world? I meant to say October. Really, honest. God knows I'm sorry. Okay, what he's not telling you is actually the rapture did occur on May 21st, but none of the Christians got in because signing over their homes to my radio show before they left was Jesus' final test of their faith, and they all failed. So the rapture happened, you didn't make it, so what can I tell you? But apparently he's out there and he's getting a lot of news coverage, and he's, yes, now it's on for October. The way things are going, there might not be left much left of the world by October between typhoons and volcanoes and tornadoes and all this other stuff here that's going on. I mean, they're all across the heartland of the United States of America. I mean, major tornadoes to go with the flooding. They still have all that snow that's up in the Rockies and the Cascades that's starting to melt. And I used to live in this little town called North Bend, Washington. It's where my wife and I lived before we came here to Hawaii. And they are notorious for major floods because they're on the feed waters from the Cascade Mountains. And if you aren't familiar with the town I'm talking about, you've probably seen it in all kinds of movies and TV shows because there's this wonderful place called the Salish Lodge, and there's this waterfall, and it was where the TV series Twin Peaks was filmed. And a lot of other movies have been made up there, and it's really, really beautiful country. But everybody there, you know, we were talking to some of our friends who live up there the other day, and they're saying they're very worried because the snow has never been this thick and this heavy, and they're expecting major problems there. So, for those of you who actually do buy into this idea that there is a divine being up there who orders all things, I think you need to sort of get the message. He's very unhappy with the direction the United States is going in terms of running around the world killing brown people, breaking all those commandments and everything. I mean, you're not seeing, record F5 tornadoes smiting Iran, are you? You're not seeing massive flooding wrecking Iran, are you? There's a message there. We're on the bad side, basically. All right, moving right along here, Dominique Strauss-Kahn. There is a classic case of a fall from grace. Laboratory tests have, after a week, it's amazing. May 1st, they said, we got bin Laden's DNA. It's really him after only a couple of hours. It's taken almost a week here for Dominique Strauss-Kahn, but they have confirmed, in fact, that his DNA was found on the maid's clothes that were taken into evidence. So, it's not looking too good for him. It's not looking like, it's a setup, it's anti-Semitism, it's blah, 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 blah. Now, interestingly, the latest report is that Dominique Strauss-Kahn's legal team, because they can't get to the victim, she's in protective custody. Because we all know when you go up against the money junkies, bad things can happen to you when you speak truth to the money junkies. So they can't get at the victim, but apparently some of Dominique Strauss-Kahn's legal team, their aides, they're over in Africa. And they're talking to the maid's family, and these are like really, really poor people. And they're offering them money to tell her to make the case go away. Look, we got an iPod, really cool. We'll give you this, and you tell, your niece or your daughter or your sister to stop saying bad things about our boss. I mean, it doesn't get any sleazier than that. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, American. Welcome back to the show. And the reason I wanted to spend a little time on the Dominique Strauss-Kahn story, and especially how his associates are over in Africa trying to bribe the family of his rape victim to get her to drop the case. It just ultimately, it doesn't get sleazier than that. Okay? And I bring it up because we're seeing on public display the morality and the ethics of financial people. And I wanted to hit that point because last night I saw this huge steaming pile of propaganda on HBO called Too Big to Fail. And it's HBO's rather hurriedly put together but very expensive, really good, really fine cast attempt to retell the story of the economic meltdown in the most positive light possible. And I get a very strong sense that HBO put this together in response to the documentary Inside Job, which won the Academy Award for Best Documentary earlier this year. And yet, try and find it anywhere. It's all, you cannot see it anywhere on TV. So HBO comes out with Too Big to Fail, and they're playing it all the time. On the high def, on the low def, on the left def, on the right def. It's all over the place. And basically it takes all the incidents that we were already aware of in the news media and then tries to spin behind them a backstory of noble bankers and noble government officials and Hank Paulson just trying to do their job the best way they can and stuck with a really bad set of circumstances. And, oh, it was all the fault of those homeowners and nobody expected real estate to drop, blah, 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 blah. And not one word about the criminality. Not one word about Congress repealing Glass-Steagall. Not one word about Bear Stearns selling the same mortgage over and over and over again into different investment vehicles. This was a poo polish that was going on. And unfortunately, the money junkies have enough money to go out there and basically hire Hollywood to portray them in the best possible light, and anybody who stands up against them in the worst possible light. We saw this back in the Clinton, in the run-up to the Clinton administration, where Hewitt, the executive producer of CBS 60 Minutes, was on videotape admitting that they edited their coverage of Jennifer Flowers to make her look like a loser in order to protect Bill Clinton's chances for the nomination. The story was true. Bill and Jennifer were having an affair, and CBS 60 Minutes spun it to make Bill look good and her look bad. And Don Hewitt is on videotape admitting that they did that. And so that's the way this situation is going on. So this Too Big to Fail, they're attempting to retell the story in a way that makes the bankers and the financial people look like, victims along with everybody else. Of course, at the end, they can't, because after all that government money is given to the banks, they still didn't turn around and loan it to ordinary people. They just kept it, and they wrote themselves the huge, huge bonuses. But where this Too Big to Fail film stops short is they don't talk about the outright criminality, the actions done by these various groups that should have put them in jail. Conflicts of interest, Goldman Sachs being paid by the state of California to sell California bonds and then turning around and telling their own investors to bet against them. That kind of corruption that's going on was never even touched. And I think it's a very telling condemnation of American corporate media that this made-up movie, this dramatization, this retelling of history is getting so much airplay, and the Academy Award-winning documentary Inside Job is all but ignored. You need to find it. I don't know of any place where it's available for viewing online for free, so you're going to have to buy or rent the DVD. I would presume it might be at Netflix. I don't know. I don't have a Netflix account. But anybody who does know where it's possible to see Inside Job, please send it in, because this is the real story of what happened, not this HBO puff piece. HBO is trying to make it look like the bankers and the government people are just, they were just caught up in circumstances. No, they created this mess. It doesn't talk about the tax incentives given to corporations to encourage offshoring to make it easier for banks to steal houses from the American people. It glosses over all of that stuff. And it's one of the biggest lies to come out of the TV set in recent memory, because you watch this so-called docudrama and you think you're being informed about what really happened, but you're not. You think you're learning what really happened, but you're not. You're being fed a fairy tale and a fable that serves government and the bankers. And it is an insult to you, because they put the blame for this whole meltdown back on those gosh darn reckless homebuyers. All righty. Moving right along here, possibly as a sign of how terrified the government and the bankers have become of the blogosphere and the alternative media, the White House has just added a new White House position, to deal with unfavorable online media. I guess that means me. So they've hired this guy named Jesse Lee in their communication department. He's the director of progressive media and online response. Apparently it's going to be his job, anytime that we say anything bad about the president, it's his job to come out and somehow deal with this, whether that means Trojans or denial of service attacks or harsh language or what, we have yet to see. But we've now got the White House is now reacting to us instead of the other way around. That's another sign of progress. What was it that Gandhi said? It is the duty of a civil resistor to provoke a response. So in that best Gandhi tradition, we have just succeeded. Now, an interesting little wrinkle, and talk about gullibility. Doctors are starting to require their patients to sign over copyright agreements as a condition of treatment. And what it is the agreements transfer the copyright over anything the patient may write about their experience at the HMO or the doctor's office or the hospital to the doctor or the medical establishment. The idea being that if the doctor screws it up and the patient goes online and said, that doctor, I went in for an appendectomy and he gave me a nose job, the doctor will have the legal right as owner of the copyright on all this material to order a takedown notice in order to protect their reputation online. Now, this is where it gets really kind of interesting, because it's all of this copyright contract agreement is coming from this one legal boilerplate factory. I guess they went out of business cranking out phony foreclosures and all the rest of that, and they've gone into this new thing about going around to hospitals saying, we'll give you these agreements or we'll sell you these agreements, and this will protect you from negative fallout if you should really mess up one of your patients. And it turns out they're not legally binding, because at the time the copyright is assigned, the material being copywritten has not been created yet, and there's no such thing as an a priori copyright. And so this legal firm is basically taking all these medical establishments for a ride. It's a bill of goods. It's a hoax. It's a fraud. Under the right of free speech, you have the right to say anything you want about a doctor that doesn't do a good job on you. And they have no legal principle. They have no moral or ethical grounds to say, no, you're not allowed to complain if we make a really bad mistake on you. So it just shows how litigious and how sometimes silly the whole situation is getting, because these doctors apparently have paid a lot of money for these contracts, and it's causing all kinds of problems with client confidence, because if you go into a doctor's office and the doctor says, you got to sign away your right to complain if I do a bad job, the first thing the patient's going to think is, what is it you're afraid you might do to me? Good reason for us all to go back to taking our vitamin pills and treating ourselves at home whenever possible. All righty, let's see, moving right along. Over in Tripoli, the war is escalating. Britain is sending in their Apache attack helicopters. Tripoli is being hit with heavy airstrikes over and over and over again. A lot of people, are being killed, blown to bloody bits here. And Britain is basically escalating the situation. The U.S. is escalating. They're going in. And we all know what this is about. This is death to the gold dinar. Our cause is just, for we are making the world safe for private central banking and compound interest. And no sacrifice of other people's children is too great to preserve what made the Federal Reserve bankers great, so forth and so on. Caller just came in and said the website for Inside Job is topdocumentaryfilms.com and documentaristorm.com. you really need to see Inside Job. It is a far more accurate depiction of what caused this horrendous crash and the destruction of the American economy than this puff piece from HBO. Normally, I applaud HBO because they've come out with some really good documentaries like Hacking Democracy and Smartest Guys in the Room. But this wasn't even a documentary. It was a docudrama. It was a dramatization. And it was spun for a very, very obvious pro-business, pro-banker, pro-government agenda. So Inside Job won the Academy Award for Best Documentary. Must see, even ahead of Pirates of the Caribbean, Stranger Tides. Got to go see that one here. Now, Senator Kerry and Senator McCain are pushing this non-binding resolution through Congress to support the Libyan war. And this is a little bit of a double shuffle. We're coming up in that election season, and the Congress wants to do something, but they don't want to be held to account for it by the voters. And so that's what this little dodge is all about. Now, we're coming up on the end of the segment. We're going to take a commercial break. When we come back here, we're going to be talking about this non-binding resolution and what it means and what the War Powers Act has to say about all of this stuff and the abandonment of congressional oversight over the president's ability to declare war any place he just happens to feel like it. So we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back on the air. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm getting a ton of emails from listeners. Inside Job is available at Netflix. It's apparently also available at Blockbuster. It is out there. You have to hunt for it, but you can look at it. You can see it. Somebody else wrote in, apparently it is up on YouTube in 8 separate chunks that you need to look at, but it is out there, and it is definitely something that you should be looking at, because what you're getting from this HBO puff piece is not the full story. You're getting basically what the bankers and what the U.S. government want you to think happened, not what actually did happen here. Now, getting back to the situation with Senators Kerry and McCain pushing a resolution to support the Libyan war. This is a non-binding resolution to simply express that the Senate supports the war in Libya. Now, this is a bit of a dodge, because under the War Powers Act, President Obama is authorized to deploy troops and military force anywhere in the world for 30 days to deal with an emerging crisis. After 30 days, the president must get a declaration of war from the United States Congress in order to continue the military action. But there's a problem. America is very war-weary. The American people are tired of seeing their kids come back in these cheap metal boxes covered with these flags made in China. And nobody who is currently in the United States Congress wants to be on record as having voted for more war as we head into the 2012 campaign season. And so what Kerry and McCain are attempting to do is an end run around the limitations of the War Power Act by sort of having this sense of the Senate bill, which isn't actually a formal declaration of war, but Obama can say, oh, I've got the permission of the U.S. Congress to continue the war past the 30 days. So that seems to be what's going on here. They want their election and eat it too. They want their war and eat it too. And again, it's weasel wording, it's weasel politics, it's supporting the war against the gold dinar, supporting the war against a state central bank. At the same time, they can go and say to their potential voters, gee, these wars are really bad, and if you reelect me, I will do my best to bring them to a speedy end. Remember when Barack Obama was campaigning in 2008? And he had that, let's see if I still have that in the rack here. Here we go.
I will promise you this, that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war. You can take that to the bank.
Well, now we know why the banks are in such trouble. So, again, this is American politics. They're going to say one thing to you, and then they're going to go and do whatever they feel like doing. It's just like last week where Obama speaks to America and it appears to show a strong spine towards Israel, and then turns around at the AIPAC speech and basically gives Israel everything that they want, which really comes down to whatever's left of your money and however many of your children have not yet been blown to bits in these wars on Israel's enemies. Speaking of blown to bits, when we were in Vietnam, the U.S. government tried to obscure and hide the number of killed because it was obviously something Americans reacted very negatively to. And it wasn't until Vietnam was over that the final numbers of some 60,000 dead were finally acknowledged and made public. Here in the current wars, the U.S. government has adopted a policy of categorizing and classifying deaths in order to not have a single large number that is shocking to the American people. So in the current wars, the official number for soldiers killed in action are the ones who die right on the battleground with their boots on the ground and they get killed dead right on the spot. If they survive the attack, if they're wounded and they die later at a hospital, it's a whole different classification. If they get sent back home and then they die at home from the aftermath complications of the injuries they've received, it's another classification. And it's a way of just breaking up the number so it doesn't look like it's all that big. Total number of soldiers who have died as a result of these wars, 73,846. We've gone past Vietnam at this point. We've been in Afghanistan longer than we were in World War II. How many more nations do we have to invade before it's a world war? I think we're there, personally. And looking around at the state of our country, the United States of America, we're losing. We're on the verge of losing this whole thing. And there was never a chance that we were going to win. Of course, the bankers don't care. They love world wars because everybody goes into debt. Germany just paid off their World War I debt about, 4 or 5 months ago? No wonder they're trying to start up World War III. Can't let the people get out of debt to the banks. Can't let the slaves break free. By the way, apparently we're getting reports there was an attempt on Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan. His convoy was attacked. Apparently whoever planted the bomb in front of the convoy was unaware Erdogan was not actually in it at the time. He was being helicoptered to a new location. But it looks like we're starting into a season of wet work, and of course we all have to scratch our heads and wonder what small Mid-Eastern nation with a long history of assassination, including that botch up in Dubai last year, what nation does not like Erdogan? And then we start looking for our assassins there. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Visit us online at whatreallyhappened.com. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, over in Iceland, one of their big volcanoes has erupted again. Of course, Iceland, like Hawaii, is nothing but volcano. We had some friends come out here for a visit, and they got off the airplane. Little kid says, "Can I see a volcano?" And I go, "Look down." And there you are. So they've got this volcano, and it's causing diversion of air traffic and other issues. Apparently, even Barack Obama, when he got done prying his car off that driveway to get it going again, had to change his flight plans to sort of get around that. And I was noticing very interesting. We're seeing all these real-time maps in the media about the ash cloud coming from the Iceland volcano. The ash is here, the ash is there. And high drama, the volcano is erupting, blah, 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 blah. And we don't get anything like that at all about the radiation coming from Fukushima, which has already covered a far larger part of the Earth and has far longer consequences for the health of the human race. Volcanic ash is very dangerous. It's very destructive of equipment. But once it's on the ground, basically it's fertilizer. Plants love the stuff. All right? So why are we seeing this dichotomy where the volcano gets all this news coverage and the American media is hardly talking about the reactors at all? Well, it's very simple. Because unlike TEPCO and General Electric, volcanoes can't sue you for making them look bad in the media. So, of course, the volcano, oh, bad volcano, bad volcano. Now, meanwhile, over there in Fukushima, TEPCO has once again admitted that reactors 1, 2, and 3 have all melted down to varying degrees. And we're seeing this kind of weird seesaw thing where TEPCO will say, yeah, this is bad. Then the government of Japan comes back and says, no, it's not that bad. And it'll sit for a week, and then TEPCO will come out and say, yeah, actually, it was that bad. We've known Reactor 2 was melted down for over a month now. Reactor 1 was admitted to several weeks ago. We intuited Reactor 3 was from the types of isotopes that were coming out of that. Last week they admitted all 3 were melted down. Then earlier, actually yesterday they were saying, well, it's only Reactor 1. Then today they're back to saying it's Reactor number 2. At the very best, they're still guessing. At the very worst, there's obfuscation for political and financial motives. And again, it is this awareness that we're not being given the actual hard facts that allows people to sort of let their imaginations run wild about what's going on. They did dump another 250 tons of highly radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. And where it really gets kind of interesting, and I want to caution up front, it is way too early to hit the panic button, but there is a typhoon that is getting ready to wallop the Philippines. Talk about an era of natural disasters. Oh, man, everybody's getting hit. So they're calling it Typhoon Songda, and at the moment, its predicted track for the eye of the storm passes right over the Fukushima nuclear power station sometime next week. Now, the good news is that if the track forecasting for this Typhoon Songda is as accurate as the predicted tracks for hurricanes that we have down here in Hawaii, then where that typhoon is actually going to be a week from now is pretty much anybody's guess. Because those tracks are really only reliable for about 24 hours out. And everything beyond that, the 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, tends to dance around like a rattlesnake on crack. They just like to put those long multi-day paths out there to make it look like the science of meteorology is really getting a grip on how things are working. The reality is they aren't. One time last year, I took several of these hurricane tracks for one that was approaching us, and I overlaid them and animated them. And, yeah, that far end of the track was just whipping back and forth. Completely, it was unusable. It's just there to look good. It's there to make the weather services look good. So we don't really know with any certainty where that typhoon is going to go. There's concern, but again, it's too soon to push the panic button. But obviously, the concern for everybody is building number 4, which is already leaning. And if a hurricane were to pass right over the site, there's a good probability building 4 would be knocked over with its reactor cooling pool, the spent fuel rod cooling pool, has the most spent fuel rods of any pool there at the site. And, of course, obviously, all the radioactive contamination that is spilled onto the ground is going to get sucked up and blown along the course track of the storm. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that one. But like I said, the fact that the track is over Fukushima right now, it's not a given. Keep an eye on it. Hopefully the law of accumulating round-off air will dodge another bullet with that one. We'll see what goes on. Now, over in Yemen, there's this big push to try and come up with a good reason for a war. Let's go bomb somebody. It reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean, the third one. I'm blanking on the name of the thing. Dead Man's Chest. I guess that's it. Yeah. Or anyway, the pirate captain is frustrated and says, find me that monkey. I feel like shooting something. And it seems like our whole military department is like that. They're taking all this money. They're making these hideously expensive warplanes. Even the Pentagon is now admitting the F-35 is too expensive. It's up to something like $105 million for every single aircraft. Do you know how many schools you could build for $105 million? So even the Pentagon is saying this thing is way too expensive. But if they don't go out and use these weapons, if they don't use them up, then they can't go buy new ones. They come out and say, we need a new bomber. So you got a whole bunch of bombers sitting over there doing absolutely nothing. You ought to see the airplane graveyard in Arizona. You can look at it through Google Earth. Just all of these warplanes that were built at hideous expense, and they're sitting in the Arizona desert just rotting away. That's tax money taken from your parents and your grandparents to build these things, and they were never used. It's just a racket. So over in Yemen, the FBI is now claiming they have a fingerprint from al-Qaeda's top bomb maker, to a trio of explosive devices used in recent attacks on the United States. So this is the run-up to invade Yemen again. We already have troops in Yemen. Now they want to escalate there. They found a fingerprint on an explosive device used in a recent attack on the United States of America. Isn't that amazing? The wonders of modern technology. A bomb-proof fingerprint. A bomb-proof fingerprints must come from the same company that makes those explosion and flame-resistant passports that were found after 9/11. Because the instant I hear this thing about, we found a fingerprint on the remains of a bomb, the first thing I remember is Vince Foster, the White House Deputy Counsel, Clinton-era White House Deputy Counsel, whose murder made to look like a suicide is what launched me on this whole chapter of my life. Because the gun that was found with Vincent Foster at Fort Marcy Park had no fingerprints on it at all. I mean, the official story is Vince Foster, under stress, hot July day, sweating with the stress of a man about to kill himself, puts the barrel in his mouth, pulls the trigger, and leaves no fingerprints on the gun. Why? Because according to the FBI, it was a hot day. And the fingerprint just sort of faded away. And yet here we have an al-Qaeda fingerprint on an exploded bomb that survives the explosion. Gets kind of weird out there, I think. All righty. Now, a lot of people right now are following this issue that Congress may once again extend the Patriot Act. Have you ever noticed throughout America's history that all of these laws that are passed, to deal with an emergency, they eventually become permanent? Most people don't know this because it happened long before you were born. But the income tax, the personal income tax on the wages and salaries of Americans was passed as an emergency wartime measure. And it was going to be rescinded as soon as the crisis was over, and it never was. We see this happen all the time where, we must have this law to deal with the present crisis, but we'll rescind it down the road when it's no longer necessary. And so they're going to renew the Patriot Act for another 4 years, continue the assault on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and just rush us on down the road to being a fascist dictatorship. Because the U.S. government is scared of the American people. They're not worried about terrorists. All the terrorists out there are fakes and phonies, like Adam Perlman and Joseph Cohen and all the rest of those crew. They're all play acting. It's all theater. It's all Rita Katz and site intelligence and domains by proxy and all the rest of it. It's all theater to scare you into throwing your money and your children into pointless wars of conquest against Israel's enemies or anybody living over oil or anybody daring to have a state-issued currency. And it's just an absolute hoax. Fool me once. So they're going to extend the Patriot Act, and they're going to go on listening to your phone calls, reading your emails, looting your computer, tracking you through your cell phones. Why? Because you're a terrorist? No. They're not worried about terrorists. They're worried about you. They're worried that what happened in Iceland could happen here. They're worried that what happened in Egypt could happen here. They're worried about what's starting to happen in Spain could happen here. They're worried about what happened in Greece happening here. Everyone likes to call it the Arab Spring. It's not an Arab Spring. It's a global spring. The push to create a global financial dictatorship, the New World Order, where we're all slave to the International Monetary Fund, to those pretty printed pieces of paper, the ink and paper, that binds us as tightly as slave chains made of steel. And people are standing up and saying, we're not going to go any further. We see the ace up the sleeve. We know it's a con game. It's snake oil, and we're going to stop. And the people who have been trying to bring about this dictatorship, they've invested years and a lot of money, and they're not ready to give it up because money junkies are slaves to their addiction. Money junkies will enslave you to their paper and ink because they are slaves to their gold. It's time for an intervention, and that's what's happened. That's what happened in Iceland. When Iceland's economy was destroyed by the mortgage-backed security fraud, the Icelanders threw the bankers who did it in jail, and they fired the government that helped them do it. And that's what we should have done. Iceland's economy is already on a rebound. I mean, the impact from this volcano, of course, is going to be very, very harsh for them. But prior to the volcano, Iceland's economy was one of the few in the world that was really starting to ratchet back up again. Because they punished the crooked bankers, and they gave the new generation of bankers a reason not to engage in such fraud ever again. Here in the United States, of course, we're going the other way. We reward criminality and corruption. We punish the innocent. And that's the reason the nation is headed in such a dangerous, dangerous direction here. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Tony in Vancouver. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. Great to talk to you. Well, we're getting pretty desperate here, looking for a Geiger counter that is within everyone's reach to buy. And there's one on sale, a pocket Geiger counter from, I think it's the same company that you bought those do-it-yourself Geiger counters. This one's pre-made. It's in a plastic container.
I got it. I mean, they sent me one of those for an evaluation, and I can't recommend that unit. I cannot recommend that unit. One of the issues you need to be aware of course, is the size of the sensor tube determines how sensitive the unit is going to be. And their little Mueller tubes are so tiny that it's possible for the radiation to miss these things completely. And I got to tell you, the one that I continue to have the best luck with is this Quartex unit. And I forget what I paid for it, and I've had it for a lot of years, and it has not failed on me yet. And I'm going to go ahead and hunt them down and put them up as a link to the radiation page at my website, because so far they seem to be the only modestly priced Geiger counter that seems to have a degree of reliability around it. But that other unit you're talking about, I cannot recommend it in good conscience. I went through 3 of those, and I couldn't keep them working. There's a design flaw. There's absolutely a design flaw in the circuit.
Okay. Thanks very much. Yeah.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Ultimately, of course, the Geiger radiation meters, it is an issue because the government's not going to test any food. The FDA was up there in that press conference with the Alaska fishing industry and saying, no, we don't need to test food for radiation. How silly of you to say that. EPA has quit daily monitoring of radiation. They'll do a report every 3 months, which will probably get huge amounts of media coverage to judge by the what we've seen so far here. All right, getting back over to the Mideast here, Russia. I got to tell you, when I was a kid, and we were getting all the bovine excrement in school about how evil the communists were, and how bad and cruel the Russians were, and how they just lived to bad things to good people, and how they loved to file their own teeth because they thought pain was fun, and all these other images of the Russians. And then I actually met a few when I was with the space agency, and they actually turned out to be really nice guys. And so perhaps less surprising right now that in the current situation we are finding Russia appearing to be the voice of reason and trying to keep the push for World War III from escalating any further. Russia has come out and announced unequivocal support for the unity deal between Hamas and Fatah in Palestine. And unequivocal is a diplomatic message saying we're going to back them, period, end of discussion, and there's no reason for you, there's no point in you coming in and arguing with us. Our mind is made up. This is the course we're going to go on. Russia is sending a message. They will support the new unified Palestine, not only diplomatically at the United Nations as they push for statehood, but against any further encroachments by Israel. And so Russia has just drawn a line in the sand. And our government is foolish to try and step across it, no matter how much they're goaded by Israel. And it looks like Russia's trying to keep this thing from going any further. Remember how World War II got going? They kept appeasing Germany and appeasing Germany. Neville Chamberlain said, let them have the Sudetenland. We'll have peace in our time. And then Hitler went into Poland and France, and it just went completely out of control. And Russia understands. The United States is doing exactly the same thing. Oh, we have a reason to go into Afghanistan. Oh, now we have a reason to go into Iraq. Now we have a reason to go into Yemen. Now we have a reason to go into Somalia. And now we have a reason to go into Pakistan and into Libya and into Sudan. And the ultimate prize, of course, getting a war going with Iran. And Russia understands from World War II, and remember, Russia, of all the countries on earth, paid the highest price in terms of deaths of their citizens and their soldiers in World War II. They don't want to see that happen again. So it looks like they're trying to find some way that they can calm this thing down, because they understand that money junkies, when they get that war fever, they will not stop until somebody makes them stop. Neville Chamberlain would not work here today any better than he did in the run-up to World War II. So they're trying to calm things down by saying, this is it. Palestine has to be a state, and then all of the tension in the Mideast is going to go away. Meanwhile, Israel has approved 300 new settlements on land stolen from the Palestinians. So they're still goading and provoking this, and of course the media is saying, oh, the Iranians are the bad people. They're the evil ones. They worship the moon, and they dress funny, and they smell bad, and you've got to hate them. And again, where's the history? Since it became an Islamic state in 1979, how many countries has Iran invaded? In that same period of time, how many countries has Israel attacked or invaded? And the same thing with the U.S. We're going to go to the phones. Actually, no, we're coming to the end of this break. So Dave in South Carolina, hang on, and we're going to go to commercials. And when we come back, we'll be taking your phone call and talk about whatever it is you want to talk about here. So we're coming up on the end of the break. Commercial music should be starting right about here. And the phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
When all this twisted steel was swept away, did these remaining holes reveal what's really happened?
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Dave in South Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thank you for your show, and thank you for taking my call. Can you hear me now?
What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. I was just going to say, I wanted your opinion about this. I'm just seeing Bibi Netanyahu speak to the Congress today, and, Obama doing the AIPAC thing and all that. Anyway, it sort of seems to me that maybe we're being engineered into a situation where the Zionist Christians want Armageddon, as they call it, and it's like they're playing by the playbook or something like that, reading the book of Revelation or something. But anyway, it seems to me that we're going to be positioning our troops to fight Israel's wars and give Eretz Israel what they wanted all this time, from the Euphrates to the Nile.
There's definitely that push for it, and Israel has always used that biblical definition of Israel as a justification for not drawing its borders today. They keep saying, we already have borders, the Nile and the Euphrates. And as far as exploiting the end times myth, first of all, most of that Armageddon, end of the world mythology is not found in the original scriptures from which the Bible is derived. Scholars have gone back and looked. It's just not there. And most of that, rapture and all the rest of that comes out of something called the Schofield Bible, which was a more recent variation on the theme, kind of like the HBO's, Too Big to Fail was sort of a variation on the theme of what actually happened with the economic meltdown. But there's absolutely no question that, Israel is exploiting the Christian Zionists and the fundamental Christians' desire for the end times and the rapture in order to build support for Israel inside the United States of America. And it's very, very scary to realize that there are people walking around this country right now who'd be perfectly happy to start World War III in order to get Jesus to come down and invite all us up to the big house. And as a matter of fact, Sarah Palin's church up there in Alaska is one of these groups that isn't content to sit and wait for the final judgment, but to actively work to bring it about every single day. And that's a little bit scary. And, of course, it's kind of interesting that Israel would exploit this mythology so successfully because, according to this whole end times mythology, the Jews don't get raptured up to heaven. They get left behind. And so, it would almost seem like the Christian Zionists would realize, why is Israel pushing this so hard when, according to this myth, they're not going to benefit from it when Jesus comes down anyway? But it's just one of those many contradictions that conveniently get overlooked.
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm going to leave you with this part and thought. The question here was, let's see, it seems to me, though, that, the exploitation of the myth of the Revelation and all that, I didn't know that about the Schofield and all that, what you just said. But anyway, it seems to me that the...
Coming up on the station break.
Okay, well, go ahead, Michael. I'll let you back to your show then, brother.
All right, Thanks an awful lot there. All right. Religion is used to fight wars because that way you don't have to pay the soldiers what it's really worth to go into the neighboring country and kill a bunch of people and steal their wealth. Instead of having to give them more pay for that, you just say, oh, you're going to go to heaven for that. You go in there, take the Holy Land from the infidel, and your sins are forgiven, and you'll get a free ride up to the pearly gates. We'll be back after station identification.
Out all their credit cards, some are working 2 jobs and living in cars. Minimum wage won't pay for a roof, won't pay for a drink. If you gotta have proof, just try it yourself, Mr. CEO. See how far 5.15 an hour will go. Take a part-time job at one of your stores. I bet you can't make it here anymore.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And just to sort of wrap up with our previous caller, it is much easier and certainly far less costly for those who seek war to wrap those wars in religious mythology, not only to basically send them out and do the conquests in exchange for passage to a mythical afterlife and not have to pay them, but simply reassuring soldiers that there is an afterlife that they'll go to if they die in battle makes for a more effective soldier. It's very easy to get a fanatically religious person to go out and commit murder on a mass scale and risk their life, even commit suicide, whether it's kamikazes or the suicide bombers or the over-the-top-of-the-hill Marines. They'll fling themselves to their death because they're convinced they're going to wake up in a place with harps and wings and puffy clouds and 47 raisins. Atheists who know that there is no life but the one that we experience now, that there is no heaven and hell but the ones we make for ourselves on planet Earth. It's very hard to get them to go out and kill on command, no matter how many flags you wave. We ran a story at whatreallyhappened.com last week where sociologists had done a correlation between the degree of religious devotion in countries versus their willingness to go out and commit mass murder wrapped in a flag, and found, not too surprisingly, that the more atheistic nations are the more peaceful ones, that the most warlike nations are the ones that are fanatically religious. Hitler was Catholic. He was going to basically make Catholicism the state religion of Germany in exchange for the Vatican's support against the Weimar Republic. Hitler had sung in the choir at the monastery at Lambach as a child. That's where he found the swastika and adopted it as his emblem. Whether it's inquisitions or witch burnings or whatever. I mean, history has shown good people will do good things. Bad people will do bad things. But to get good people to do bad things takes religion. If you can get the people to believe in absurdities, you can trick them into committing atrocities. And so anytime somebody gets up and says this is a holy crusade or it's God's will, tar and feather the faker and get him out of town. or your children will pay a very, very, very ugly and hideous price for your lack of foresight. Now, speaking of lack of foresight, and again, one of the reasons why the U.S. government is constantly manufacturing all these phony things for us to be afraid of, because they can't really deal with the real world. And we're beginning to understand, even as the center part of the United States of America is reeling under record floods from record snow, that there is still more snow piled up in the western states on the Rockies and the Cascade Mountains, 20 feet thick. It's starting to melt. And they're looking at major, major flooding. Bob Struble, the Director of Emergency Management for Routt County in north central Colorado, is saying all we can do is watch and wait. Because the flood control infrastructure of the United States of America has been allowed to collapse. Because the money had to be spent on wars and Wall Street and Israel. I've lived through flooding. I know what it feels like. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back.
What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Join Mike on the air. Call toll-free 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go to the phones. George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Hanging in there.
Well, the thing is, if I were Abraham in the Bible, I would be really, really upset. Because I was promised...
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because I was promised I was a multitude of nations, and I get this little small piece of real estate. No, this comes to say Christians don't read their Bible.
Yeah, if there was really a God, Moses, when he was coming out of Egypt, would have turned right instead of left, and the Jews would have the oil, and the Arabs would have the desert. So...
Yeah, but also, too, it's more like I show Christians, like, Israeli TV bashing Jesus. And Christians in this country don't realize the people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and the Golan Heights are predominantly Christian and Muslim, but there's a good portion that are Christians. And I got videotape of Israeli soldiers trashing Jesus. And it's like, and you're going to support a nation that trashes our religion, but yet they pander to us to try to support them? No wonder this church is screwed up.
It's definitely a one-way street. I mean, Israel is always demanding the support and allegiance of the Christian Zionists for the cause, but Israel doesn't give any of that back. It's just a way of scamming people to support them. Now, I want to go back to what you said about Abraham, because where I thought you were going was the fact that Abraham is the source of all of these religions. You have Christianity and Islam and Judaism all trace their theological roots back to Abraham and his monotheism. And the Sunni and the Shiite, all go back to that common thread through Muhammad and back to Abraham. And if Abraham were alive today, I think he would look around at the inheritors of the religion he created, and he'd be scratching his head saying, how could you get so confused as to what is going on? And, this is what I said yesterday. Christianity is not a faith. It is 150 little tiny splinter faiths, and every one of them is different. And this really kind of gets back to a point I make on this article that I have permanently at whatreallyhappened.com called From Those Same Wonderful People Who Brought You the Inquisition. If there really were a God or gods able to communicate their existence to the minds of men, then all of the priests of all of history's religions would be 100% in agreement on all of the stuff, most especially how many gods there are. And the fact that the history of world's religion is showing complete variation on the number of gods basically tells you they're all just making it up. They're making up whatever they can sell to their particular population to keep the coins and sacrifices falling into those collection plates.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the same Christians that fall for the Zionist scam are the same people. John Hagee and Benny Hinn took all the furnitures and looted their bank accounts. You know, they would say they're doing God's will. Yet when they just stole and scammed them, you know what I mean?
This was Lloyd Blankfein. Lloyd Blankfein was saying he was doing God's will when he was taking everybody's houses.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, like with this rapture, I even heard like people selling their houses and turning it over to the ministry. They're going to be raptured out of here, and it never happened.
It is amazing. I have an article called "O Rapture" that I had up at my website back when Camping was doing his thing, and it's a history of all the times that, you know, some fanatic with a holy scripture was screaming the world is going to come to an end, and the incredible destruction that they caused from people who panicked and committed acts they otherwise would not have done. Which brings me to a rather interesting point here. This Harold Camping character terrorized all the Christians by telling them the world was coming to an end. Why is he not in Guantanamo being waterboarded right now?
Because he's probably working for Israel.
CNN?
He's probably working for Israel.
Oh, no, he's not working for Israel. He's just out for a fast buck. He's got his own radio show. It's syndicated on about 60 stations across the country, and he's trying to build his audience, to build his advertising revenues. He's scamming the people to build his audience, to build a fast buck. That's all it is.
Well, you know,
it's like Carlin says, you know, God is omnipotent, omniscient, and infallible, but he just can't handle money. He needs your spare change. He needs your money.
Well, God is not broke. I'll tell you that right now. But, you know, going back to the rapture theory, I talked to Russian people, German people, even Chinese people. The Christians told the leadership of the church told the Christians, we're going to be raptured out of here. We don't have to deal with this. And guess what? And they went through a horrific time because they stood down. Believe me, they're going to get taken out.
I got to tell you a story. I have to tell you a story. I'm having flashbacks to my youth. When I first got out of college, I briefly went to work for CBS Television City. And I actually got kicked out of my graduate program at Cal State Fullerton for daring to suggest that one day computers were going to be used to not only control all theater technology, but to put pictures on movie film for movies and stuff like this. I did this a long time ago, and when my professor on American theater history flunked me out, and I was so angry I quit school. And then I took my term paper down to CBS Television City, and I got a job helping to design the very first computerized game show scoreboards for Goodson Todman Productions. And I was there for a while, and I had that ugly run-in with the Central Intelligence Agency people down there. And then I left there, and I got hired as the technical director for a Christian TV station in Orange, California. And I'm not going to give out the call letters because I don't know who has them now, and I'm not going to malign them. But just to give you an idea of the sincerity and deep-hearted faith of most of the people working at this Christian TV station. Second week I was there, I walked into the control room, and I found one of the directors and a camera girl going at it on the floor. So, you know, fun times at Ridgemont High. And I really ought to write a book about this because it was like, you know, it was a single space in an industrial facility down there in Orange, California. And it really was kind of an interesting situation because the station manager had gone to one of these tent revival meetings where this guy had gotten up and said, the world is going to end on blank. And he named a date, and our station manager believed it. Absolutely believed it. Came back to the station and said, you know, we're going to 24 hours a day on the air, get the word out, the world is going to end on this and such a day. Didn't carry the sponsored programming, didn't bother running the commercials, didn't bother doing anything except constant harangue, 24 hours a day, the world will end, blah, blah, blah. And the day came and went, the Lord did not show up, and the TV station collapsed under all the unpaid bills. And the place just evaporated. And, you know, it's kind of, it was an object lesson in allowing belief to rule your thought processes. And our station manager just vanished. And for the last 2 weeks that we were still in operation, we pretty much just ran the place any way that we wanted to do. And it was just a very bizarre time in my life. And I left there and I went off and I got a job in a more realistic, down-to-earth kind of a studio facility. But yeah, it's kind of weird to just see that happen, where just somebody gets caught up in that whole thing, and they're absolutely convinced the world is going to end tomorrow, and we've got to say, and it was bizarre.
Well, the other thing is I don't go to church anymore because the reason is it's truth. If I really want to go out and find a romantic fling, I won't go to a bar. I'll go to a church.
I got thrown out of my church when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I went to the Congregationalist Church in Loudon, New Hampshire for 5 years. I got my little pin with the little year things down there, and I sang in the choir. And then they made their big mistake. They gave me a Bible because I read it. And I started coming in and asking questions. And the pastor called my mother and said, he really doesn't need to come back next week.
Well, good day, Mike.
My religious indoctrination. All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Oh, man, I haven't thought about that in a long, long time. That was so funny. Anyway, let's see. We talked about the snowpacks. All right, let's talk about the Taliban. We're getting kind of a couple of mixed stories here, because one story we have at whatreallyhappened.com is that Germany is very quietly hosting negotiations between the United States and the Taliban for what we're not exactly sure. But at the same time, there was this raid down in Pakistan that's being blamed on the Taliban. Attack on the Pakistan airbase. They don't know it's the Taliban. It's just sort of assumed, like when the World Trade Towers came down. Oh, must be Osama been dead for a long time. And now, of course, we're seeing all these stories about Taliban raid raises concern over Pakistan's nukes, because Pakistan, that is very much not happy with American drones coming in and killing their civilians, is a nuclear power. And an honest-to-goodness invasion or war between the United States and Pakistan is going to result in the use of nuclear weapons at the point where Pakistan feels they have no other option. So a lot of people, because Pakistan is sort of on the road to Iran, to encirclement of Iran, to starve them into submission. A lot of people are saying that we're seeing a run-up, propaganda-wise, toward the U.S. going in and grabbing Pakistan's nuclear weapons in some kind of a lightning strike attack. I'm going to presume at this point that Pakistan has already dispersed their nuclear weapons all over the countries in order to preclude that kind of an operation. But it is interesting to see where we're seeing all this concern over Pakistan's nukes. Will the terrorists get the Pakistan nuclear weapons and so forth? So maybe this is also the run-up for a false flag where there's going to be a big bada boom. Oh, got to be those gosh darn Arabs. Let's go make war on them. Hard to know what's going on, but the fact that we're lied to, yeah, that's a given and an absolute. We're going to take a break here for some commercials. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. We should be hearing music, and there it is. Back in a minute.
Estrogen dominance, a brand new 20th century disease, a phrase coined by Dr. John R. Lee 35 years ago. Dr. Lee proved that all the estrogen that is coming from food and water is having a devastating effect on our health. The rapid rise in breast cancer, uterine cancer, prostate cancer, weight gain, osteoporosis, feminizing of our boys, and early puberty of our girls, and also the destruction of natural killer cell function. Natural killer cells are our only protection from cancer and viral infection. Dr. Lee found that using natural progesterone, about 20 milligrams per day, would not only reverse osteoporosis, but would greatly reduce the cancer issues as well as dozens of other health challenges we face today. Visit our website, healthlinkamerica.com, to order the DVD on hormone imbalance. Learn how hormone imbalance destroys the immune system and get started on natural progesterone and Cyto-S. It will not only change your life, it may in fact save your life. Once again, that website is healthlinkamerica.com.
What really gets in the way of your goals and dreams? Time? Money? Education? Well, if it's all of the above, Ashworth College is for you. Ashworth can help you achieve your goals by letting you study at your own pace, online, anywhere, anytime. Your computer is your classroom. With programs as low as $39 a month, Ashworth College is one of the most affordable online schools out there. Just $39 a month. Plus, Ashworth offers over 100 nationally accredited college programs, such as criminal justice, healthcare, technology, and business. You could earn as much as $300,000 more than those without an associate's degree. No high school diploma? Well, Ashworth even offers high school completion programs. So call an Ashworth Career Advisor right now, toll free at 1-866-504-8173. That's 1-866-504-8173. Or go to ashworthtraining.com.
Do you know the truth about cancer treatments? Do you realize that with all presently accepted methods, you are not correctly attacking the cancer and you are mostly fighting to survive the treatment? Do you realize that mutilating surgery, burning and poisoning of your entire system are totally unnecessary? But now it's cancer's turn to die with LaysMed Incorporated's patented methodology. Without cutting, bleeding, drugs, or damaging radiation, we can destroy skin cancer and breast tumors of any size without adverse side effects at our physician's office. Laser technology at its best. For more information, visit www.laysmedinc.com on the web. That's www.laysmedinc.com.
Call now, 501-255-0528. 501-255-0528. 501-255-0528.
What this country is coming to, I sure would like to know. If they don't do something by and by, the rich will live and the poor will die. Doggone, I mean the panic is on.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're hearing stories that fighting is intensifying now in Yemen's capital. And again, we had that story earlier where the FBI had found a magic bomb-proof fingerprint on an explosive device used here in the United States that proved that Al-Qaeda in Yemen was behind it all. And it seems like as the American people become more and more war-weary, and certainly as the American people become far more skeptical and far less trusting of official government proclamations about why we should be going off around the other side of the planet and killing brown people, that the push to really turn this into a major regional and global war is accelerating. And it is up to the people of the United States of America to say no. We will not send our children to die in wars on the other side of the planet against people who've done us no wrong. We do have a right to say no. That's what the First Amendment is all about. And the Second Amendment gives us the teeth to back it up. There is no freedom without the freedom to say no. And we'd better reclaim that freedom very, very soon. Because if we do not choose to fight against the warmongers now, we will soon have no choice but to fight for the warmongers from now on. That's the whole end objective of all the surveillance and the checkpoints and the complete control and surveillance over all of us so that we can't say no. They're trying to take away our right to say no. If we're free people, we can say no. Slaves cannot say no. When the government comes to the house and says, we need to send your children over to invade Israel's enemies in Iran, and they may not come back alive, and if you don't have the right to say no and keep your children in your home, then you're just another slave. And I know you don't want to hear that. But the reality is the very best slaves are the people who are convinced that they're still free, even as they go through their servitude. Speaking of enslavement, there's been a case where a member of the TSA has been arrested, actually, for sexually molesting a little girl. So if you've been asking yourself the question, what kind of people would accept a job putting on rubber gloves and groping total strangers? Now you know. Now you know. Adolf Hitler actually did a lot of the same thing in Nazi Germany. Hitler went out and he found people at the lowest levels of the German society, socially inept, perverted, diseased, not mentally right. and elevated them to positions of power that in a normal free society they would never, ever have had a chance of achieving. And these losers knew that. They knew their power and prestige and authority depended entirely on their continuing support of the Führer. And so as a result, these people were Hitler's most fanatical, devoted supporters, because they knew that when Hitler fell, they would fall, and nobody would give them another job. And so that's what we're seeing here at the TSA. They're finding people in our culture that we would not allow into our homes, who would be arrested for this kind of behavior that they're going through. And they give them a job committing these molestations right there in the airport in full view of the public. And so the TSA are the most fanatical supporters of the United States government because they understand when the government falls, they're going to lose their little position of authority. They won't have a badge to hide their little sexual perversions behind anymore. It is amazing how much of Hitler's methodology our government is currently following right now. You know, fascist dictatorship for dummies, Adolf Hitler. Speaking of TSA, he had a little incident in the Minnesota airport. Apparently, the security, the police, spotted a man apparently carrying a bomb in a carry-on bag. Huge panic, threw everybody into an absolute hysteria. Turns out it was a TSA drill. And they just hadn't bothered telling the police that there was going to be a drill that day. Just put everybody in that airport into an absolute fear for no reason at all. And a reminder, in all of this nonsense, groping people, dropping laptops, looting luggage, all of that, cancer from the scanners, TSA has never, ever, ever once actually caught a real, genuine terrorist. Not one. Department of Homeland Security's own tests show that half the practice bombs they do, like this exercise in Minnesota, half of them get past the TSA and onto the airplane. Now, for a real terrorist, and by that I don't mean these phonies like Adam Perlman wrapping a towel around their head and screaming death to America, a real committed terrorist who's willing to throw his life away to carry out an unconventional attack on the great state in America, a 50% chance of achieving their goal is pretty good. That's very attractive. And if they get detected at the airport gate, why not just blow up the gate? Because from the point of view of an act of terror against America, and the goal, the socio-political event, being to make America afraid to live their life normally, blowing up a security gate is every bit as effective as blowing up an airplane. And so the fact that we're not seeing gates and airplanes explode tells us this is all a fake. It's all a fairy tale. We'll be right back.
What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Interesting little story here. As you're probably aware from earlier in the show, we're talking about the White House has now appointed a new communications director specifically to deal with online issues. Apparently, the alternative media and the blogosphere are not being particularly kind to President Barack Obama. And he's trying to figure out why they can't get the alternative media to grovel before him the way ABC and NBC and CBS and Fox all are trained to do and bribed to do. And we're now getting this interesting story about how YouTube is complying with literally thousands of requests from governments around the world, but especially from the United States government, to delete videos of protests. Now, this is kind of an interesting situation here because the Internet has been reporting these protests around the world far more than the corporate media. Many stories are broken and made popular to a mass audience here on the net before the corporate media will ever touch them. I think the best example of that would be the Downing Street memo in the aftermath of the invasion of Iraq, where this memo came out that basically said, yeah, everybody's lying to justify this war on Iraq. They're going in there for the oil, and because Saddam wanted to have a state-issued currency instead of, enslavement to a private central bank. And so they came up with this whole weapons of mass destruction, and he's got germs, and he's got chemicals, and all this other stuff. And this Downing Street memo basically came out and said, yeah, the propaganda is being basically worked around the agenda of the war. The war had been decided on, and all that was left was figuring out a way to sell it to the suckers, meaning you. That story, the Downing Street memo, the memo from Prime Minister Tony Blair's own office admitting it was all a lie, was top news on the internet, on the blogs, for almost a month before the corporate media finally began to report it in the United States of America. And the only reason they did was because everybody knew the story anyway, and the fact that the corporate media wasn't reporting on it was becoming really very, very obvious. So now here we are in an era of global revolution against the global banking cartel. And even back during the run-up to the revolution or reformation in Egypt, most of what we were seeing was coming from Al Jazeera and Press TV and the alternative media. And it wasn't until it became really obvious that Mubarak was going to have to step down that the American media finally began to give it the coverage that it deserved. Now, we know back in February, President Barack Obama went out to Silicon Valley, and he met with the head of Google and the major social media networks and computer companies, and the agenda, they admitted the agenda was to prepare to make sure that what happened in Egypt, where social media drove a revolution against a tyrant, to make sure that that could not happen here. Now, when you're thinking about standing up to bad authority, when you're thinking about standing up and defying bad government, the very first step you need to go through is to understand that it's possible to succeed. You need to learn that others feel exactly the same way that you do. One of the biggest illusions the U.S. government tries to reinforce through the media is that anybody who's not happy with the government and the way things are being done has to be some kind of a kook or a loon, or they're all alone, or they're social rejects, or they smell bad, or whatever. And that's why I keep telling my listeners the most important thing you can do is speak out, because you will give others the courage to speak out. You will let them know they're not alone in their concerns about what has happened to this country. And so to combat that, to try and reimpose the isolation, governments, including the United States government, have been going to YouTube and say, please take down the videos of protests. We don't want the world to see that how large the protests are against the global banking cartels and the G20 and all these other economic summits. We want the protests to sort of go away. And unless they're preserved and archived on non-aligned websites like whatreallyhappened.com, after a while they all go away. They're basically admitting, yeah, YouTube will take down protest videos put up there by private citizens because the government doesn't want the world to see that protests are underway or even that they're getting close to succeeding. Now, Google has been ordered by a court in Buenos Aires to stop listing and recommending websites that Israel opposes. Hasn't happened here in the United States yet, but Israel supporters in Buenos Aires went to court and said, oh, we can't have Google, listing websites that don't support Israel. And so at least within Buenos Aires, if you go to a Google search engine and you're trying to find out what's going on in Palestine, you will not be shown any websites that support Palestine's point of view. And I mention this not because Buenos Aires is really critical to the ongoing discussion, but it's one more example that Israel's supporters do not hesitate to use the law to rewrite history, to rewrite the world's perception, to favor Israel's point of view. And we have seen that many, many times, whether it's Holocaust denial laws, the arrest of historians and imprisonment of historians, the continued persecution of John Demjanjuk, even though the key evidence against him has been exposed as a fake. We're seeing it in Palestine, where the Palestinian schools are ordered to teach all about the Holocaust, but are forbidden by law to teach about the Nakba. Now, I'm one of those people that thinks truth and history should be inviolate. That the best way for the people of the world to guide their path into the future is to have a good, clear picture of what's happened in the past. But we're not seeing that. We have come to understand that our government not only lies to us about things that are happening right now, like Saddam's nukes, but that we've been lied to about things that happened in the past, like torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, mines in Havana Harbor sinking the USS Maine, whether or not it was really a surprise attack here at Pearl Harbor. And time again, we find out that Americans are the most lied to people on the face of the earth. And certainly our media, as we saw with the situation with Helen Thomas, the American media serves Israel. It doesn't serve the American people. And I know why the United States government is comfortable taking away the First Amendment, because the original purpose of the First Amendment was to provide for the protection of a press that was serving as a watchdog on government wrongdoing in order to protect the people. And when the corporate media refuses to carry out that function anyway, then they have basically lost their claim to the First Amendment. The First Amendment was not handed out for no reason at all. It's not only a right, there's a moral duty there. That you enjoy that protected freedom of speech because you have a job in society. And that is to point out where government acts incorrectly, when it's in violation of the Constitution, when it's attempting to lie the people into a war of conquest. And that is the highest of the high crimes and misdemeanors when that happens. When media abandons its traditional role as watchdog on government abuse, when it, in fact, joins the propaganda division of the government to sell you wars, it's abandoned its duty to the American people, and it's lost its right and respectability. I don't think it's ever going to get it back in any, certainly not within our lifetime. Trust takes 100 years to build, and it can be gone with the first reckless lie. What's that old saying? Trust arrives on foot but departs on horseback. It was never more true than it is right now. But there's a little bit of good news about the situation in Buenos Aires, where it's ordering Google to stop listing websites sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. And that is that the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force it to act like one, where everybody can see it. Most dictatorships are not recognized when they're ongoing, whether that was the citizens of the Soviet Union or even the citizens of Nazi Germany. They didn't realize it was a dictatorship until it was pretty much over. Same thing with the Italians under Mussolini. So getting back to what I said earlier about Gandhi, where the duty of the civil resistor is to provoke a response. The goal of that, provoking the response, is to force the dictatorship to behave like one. And when everybody sees it, that's the beginning of the end. So, all righty, we're coming to the end of the show here. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. And up in Canada, on this same topic, Canada is looking at laws that would hold website owners and operators liable for the content of any web page they link to. And, of course, this is being sold on the, ending of hate and ending of anti-Semitism. But it's a very, very dangerous law, and I'm not even sure how enforceable it's going to be. Because let's say that I, at whatreallyhappened.com, link to a website called Chocolate Chip Cookies Recipes Collection.com. And after I link to that website, the domain gets sold. Or a hacker simply breaks in and he plants a bunch of child porn all over the website, which is getting to be a very common trick, by the way, to silence websites in Canada that certain parties don't like. Hack in, plant child porn, report them to the child porn authorities. The fact that I'm linking to that website after it's been altered under this new Canadian law would make me liable. I don't think it will withstand a court test, but it's an indicator, again, of how desperate the entrenched powers are to somehow find a way to stop the revolution in information technology brought about by the internet and the blogs. We're changing the world right now. You, all of you listening to this show online, you're part of this fundamental change to the world. It is as dramatic as when Gutenberg invented movable type printing. And I'm sure 50, 100 years from now, there'll be historians looking back and being very analytical about the deep changes to society and culture and civilization brought about by the availability of interactive real-time global media. And they'll be commenting about how the entrenched political and religious powers were trying to stop it, trying to block it, just like they did Gutenberg, and ultimately how they're going to fail. All right. Going to go back to the phones here. Clarence in Oklahoma. Asio, my friend, nice to hear from you. What's going on?
Well, it's always good to talk to you. Aloha. I don't want to, not follow the etiquette, but okay. That's the very first of the hour. I hate to say it, but I was late getting in. I got a call from my sister, who works in the belly of the beast, right near me. We're both federal employees, and people would say, well, they're all a bunch of slugs sucking off the taxpayers. Well, not all of them are. Some of them really believe in the jobs they're doing. It's their system out there.
Yes.
That makes that... you are around NASA. You've seen that.
Yes.
If you come out and you try... And she went to a class... And she's been out there 28 years. And some gal that's been there 10 years is telling them how everything is going to be better following this and that. Do you have any questions? And my sister confounded them because she told them, said, I'm older than most of the people in this classroom. And I've been here, and I've seen it. And I know what she was saying. And I'm retired now. I've been there. I've seen it. There are people out there that really want to do a good job, but the system smothers them.
Yes, it does. It really, really does.
And it's like, now I know why the Roman Empire fell apart. Because it was, well, it didn't have, telephones or computers, but it gets so corrupt and so... self-absorbed, I guess, maybe. And
that's one way of putting it. But the other part of it was simply that when the money junkies took over the place, and over time, more and more of the wealth of the nation was taken away from taking care of the nation and simply piled onto the aggrandizement and bling of the Roman emperors. Have you ever had a liqueur called Goldschlager?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, it's kind of a schnapps, I think, and it's got little bits of gold leaf that float around in it. You can find it in any high-end bottle shop. It used to have a lot more gold leaf in it than it does these days. That trick of gold leaf in beverages goes all the way back to Marcus Licinius Crassus, who was the richest man in Rome, may have been in the entire world. He invented the fire department. But over time, people like him, they got into that money addiction, that money junkie, whatever, and they started piling up all the money in Rome, and they started letting the outer fringes of the empire collapse. Yeah. And when they started to fall away, and Rome didn't have the means to go out and reconquer them and say, you're still going to remain part of the Roman Empire, that's when it all started falling apart. And then the empire split up, and it went on continuing and saying, we're still Rome and we're still great. But looking back from our point of view here in the present time, we realized that Rome was rotting away and deteriorating even as they kept putting more bling on and saying, look how great we are. And I am pretty certain that 100 years from now, historians will be looking back at this time and seeing the United States as already a nation in decline and starting a world war to try and mask the symptoms of the rot.
Absolutely. And I'll say this because you're getting near a break here, and I'll try to say it real fast. At the first part of the show, I went in the Air Force because I was in college. I dropped out, lost my student deferment, still had a draft, got a 1A draft card, decided to, better join the Air Force. Army's not good. They sent them to Vietnam and, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I made it through that, but I now understand why they do it, because They want to get people when they're young and dumb. They don't have that much life experience. And I've had it.
Easy to get them to get all excited and hopped up about, going out there and killing the enemy.
Exactly.
And people who've lived a little bit longer and they've started to hit they start to feel their own mortality, it's very, very hard to convince them to kill other people.
Mm-hmm.
Young kids think they're immortal, and killing another person, they can make it feel like it's a video game.
But nowadays,
about killing other people. They lie to themselves and say, I'm killing an airplane, I'm killing a ship, I'm killing a tank, and they pretend not to think about the people inside. But when you get older and you start feeling your own mortality, it gets really hard to take another life.
Yeah.
And those things haunt you.
I know exactly what you're saying, and the whole deal is they haven't had the amount of experience I've had, and I was in the reserve for 15 years.
Okay, we got to take a break here.
I'll let you go. Yeah, I don't.
All right, thanks a lot, Clarence. We'll be back here in just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Tonight. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Apparently, in one of the chat rooms, somebody's going on and on about this whole rapture thing and saying, don't you worry about where you're going to go when you die. And when I die, I'm going to donate my body to science because even medical students need a good laugh. We're going to go back to the phones here. Clint in Nevada. Aloha, Clint. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Anyways, I wanted to bring up this article that came up in the Review Journal here in Las Vegas, and it was a big headline that said that Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda thrive on the internet, and never mind that Osama bin Laden was dead, but there was people in the store when I got I never buy a newspaper, but I bought this one, and there was a couple cops in there, a lady who looked like a cocktail waitress, and everybody was laughing at it because the first thing it commented on was Osama bin Laden stayed off the internet to avoid detection, right? And everybody brought up at the same time, well, if Osama bin Laden would stay off the internet, what it was claiming was that Al Qaeda was using the internet to recruit American Al Qaeda members. And the first thing the cops said, why would you do that when you know half the people who are going to be recruited will be undercover FBI people?
Well, the answer is nobody actually would do that. Nobody recruits anything over the internet except customers for Viagra. But, but the United States government, in order to justify the draconian security within this country, they have to convince everybody that the danger and the threat is actually here inside the United States. As long as Al-Qaeda is over there in the Mideast, everybody's saying, well, then why are you groping us in the American airports and train stations and shopping malls?
Right.
Why are you treating us like we're criminals? And so the government has to convince you, well, you are criminals, or enough of you are criminals where you should just sit still for all of this stuff. And it's just,
noticed
that hoax.
I just noticed there's just this huge push to demonize the internet. There was a movie on Lifetime channel, of guys chasing after girls on the internet, and but this article was comical, and even the cops were laughing at it. They're just trying to kill the internet. That's what they were saying.
Well, they're trying to discredit it, and I'll say just in the last 2 weeks, I mean, the amount of crud that I'm getting about HAARP and chemtrails and UFOs and Nibiru and all this other stuff pouring into me, and I can't imagine why they would think I would start posting this stuff now after all these years. But apparently somebody's getting a paycheck to say, go out and kookify whatreallyhappened.com any way that you can. And, they can't bring back trust to the government and the corporate media. All they can try and do is destroy the trust in the alternative media to level the playing field. And ultimately, I'm going to make a prediction here that when the U.S. government or Israel finally decides they're going to do another 9/11, to start the war with Iran, there'll probably be an attack on the Internet to shut down the alternative media. That, too, will be blamed on those gosh darn nasty Al-Qaeda. And obviously, why would Al-Qaeda attack the Internet when the Internet is the only way for the reality of what's going on in Israel and Palestine and the Mideast to get out to the public? So, again, common sense, use your own brain. You'll come up with the right decision.
Have a good day, Mike.
All right. That's it for our show. Thanks an awful lot. Boy, this one went by fast. We got to take off here and take the car to the car place. So we'll be back tomorrow, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, here at the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well, stay skeptical, and aloha, America.